The rain hammered against the windshield like accusations from heaven, each drop a reminder that some storms never truly pass. Chen adjusted her rearview mirror and watched the young man stumble out of the exclusive nightclub, his designer shoes slipping on the wet pavement as he fumbled with his phone. Even from 50 feet away, she could smell the entitlement radiating from him like expensive cologne mixed with cheap arrogance. "Uber for Marcus?" he slurred into the night air, though she hadn't even pulled up yet. His voice carried that particular pitch of wealth, smooth, confident, and utterly convinced the world existed solely for his convenience. The Armani jacket hung perfectly on his shoulders, probably costing more than most people made in 3 months. His platinum watch caught the neon reflections from the club's sign, a gaudy beacon of inherited privilege that made Maya's fingers tighten imperceptibly on the steering wheel. She had been driving for Dynamites Technologies' ride-sharing division for exactly 7 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days. Not that she was counting. The irony tasted bitter in her mouth every single morning when she logged into the app, seeing the company logo she had once helped design flash across her phone screen. If you're finding this story compelling so far, it takes just a moment to hit that like button and share this with someone who appreciates stories about justice and hidden genius. Your support helps bring these untold stories to light. The sleek blue D that had represented her dreams, her innovations, her late nights spent coding in a cramped apartment while surviving on instant ramen and determination. Marcus Hartwell slid into the back seat with the casual grace of someone who had never questioned whether a door would open for him. His father, Richard Hartwell III, had built an empire on the foundation of what Maya had created, though he'd never know that truth. The partition between driver and passenger separated 2 worlds that had once been connected. "Pacific Heights, the big house on Fillmore," Marcus mumbled, not bothering to look up from his phone. His fingers moved across the screen with practiced entitlement, probably posting another Instagram story about his evening's conquests. The blue light cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp cheekbones that had graced the covers of tech magazines, alongside articles about the Hartwell dynasty and their innovative approach to transportation technology. Maya's hands found their practiced position on the wheel, navigating with the muscle memory of countless rides. "You know," Marcus continued, his voice taking on that peculiar tone wealthy young men used when they wanted to share their wisdom with the less fortunate, "I don't usually take rides like this. Usually have my own driver. But Carlos had the night off, and honestly, sometimes it's fun to see how the other half lives." The windshield wipers continued their rhythmic battle against the storm, a metronome keeping time with Maya's carefully controlled breathing. She had learned, over these 7 months of invisible servitude, to regulate her responses like a meditation practice. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Don't let them see you react. Don't give them the satisfaction of knowing they've drawn blood. "Must be interesting work," she managed, her voice professionally neutral despite the hurricane building in her chest. "Seeing the city from this perspective, night after night?" "Oh, I bet. Though I have to say, I've always wondered what kind of person chooses to drive other people around for a living. I mean, no offense, but surely there are better opportunities out there for someone like—" He paused, studying her reflection in the rearview mirror with the casual scrutiny of someone examining an interesting insect. "Someone with your background." The comment hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Maya's eyes met his in the mirror for just a moment, long enough for her to catalog the complete absence of curiosity behind his gaze. He saw a middle-aged Asian woman in a company polo shirt, someone whose story began and ended with his convenience. He had no idea he was sitting 3 feet away from the person who had revolutionized ride-sharing algorithms, who had created the predictive routing system that had made Dynamites the most efficient transportation network in the world. Maya's hands found their practiced position on the wheel, navigating with the muscle memory of countless rides. You know what my father always says? He says that in America, anyone can make it if they really try. That's what's beautiful about capitalism. It rewards innovation and hard work. Take Dynamites, for instance. My dad built that company from nothing, just pure vision and determination. Maya's knuckles went white against the steering wheel. The buildings of Pacific Heights rose around them like monuments to stolen dreams, each mansion a testament to the peculiar mathematics of modern American success. She had driven this route hundreds of times now, but tonight the familiar landmarks felt especially cruel. The way the streetlights illuminated the perfectly manicured gardens, the way the architecture seemed to whisper about old money and older lies. "Your father must be very proud of what he's built," she said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Through the passenger window, the city spread out below them like a circuit board, all connected pathways and flowing energy. Maya had once believed she could redesign those pathways, make them more efficient, more fair. Now she was just another vehicle moving through someone else's system. "Oh, he is. I mean, the company's worth almost $8 billion now. Can you imagine? $8 billion from an idea about making transportation better." Marcus shifted in his seat, warming to his favorite subject. People always ask him about the early days, how he came up with the core technology. He's modest about it, but I know he was pulling 18-hour days, coding until his fingers bled, really grinding it out in those first years. The lies came so easily from his mouth that Maya wondered if he had started to believe them himself. Or perhaps Richard Hartwell had rewritten history so thoroughly that even his own son didn't know the truth about those early days, the truth about the young programmer who had approached him with revolutionary algorithms and a naive belief in partnership. The truth about the contracts that had been modified after signing, the patents that had been filed under the wrong names, the quiet settlements that had buried inconvenient facts beneath layers of legal paperwork and non-disclosure agreements. "Innovation takes many forms," Maya said, pulling into the circular driveway of the Hartwell mansion. The imposing house blazed with lights against the stormy sky. Marcus was already reaching for his wallet, pulling out cash with the casual indifference of someone who had never needed to count change. "Keep it," he said, adding a tip that was simultaneously generous enough to be insulting and small enough to reinforce the gulf between them. "And hey, maybe look into some coding boot camps or something. I heard those are pretty good for people trying to get into tech." The recommendation hung in the air between them like a perfectly crafted joke that only one person understood. Maya took the money with steady hands, her expression professionally grateful despite the cosmic absurdity of receiving career advice from someone whose entire life had been built on her stolen work. "Thank you for the suggestion. I'll definitely consider that." As Marcus disappeared through the imposing front doors of his family's mansion, Maya sat in the driveway for a moment longer than necessary. The rain continued its relentless percussion against the roof, and she found herself staring at the fountain's endless cycle, water rising, flowing, returning to its source, only to begin the journey again. There was something hypnotic about the repetition, something that reminded her of code loops and algorithmic patterns. Her phone buzzed with another ride request, pulling her back to the present moment. The app displayed a pickup location across town, in one of those neighborhoods where tech workers lived in expensive apartments while complaining about housing costs. Maya accepted the ride and backed out of the driveway, leaving the Hartwell mansion behind her like a fever dream made of marble and lies. But as she drove through the rain-soaked streets of San Francisco, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in those few minutes. Perhaps it was the casual cruelty of Marcus's suggestions, or the way he had spoken about his father's innovation with such uninformed pride. Perhaps it was simply that after 7 months of invisible service, she had finally heard her own story told back to her as someone else's triumph. Whatever it was, Maya Chen knew that she couldn't drive through other people's lives forever.
The algorithms that had made Dynamics possible were still burning bright in her mind, along with new ideas, new possibilities, new ways to revolutionize not just transportation, but the entire relationship between technology and justice. The rain began to lighten as she navigated toward her next pickup, and for the first time in months, Maya allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to step out from behind the steering wheel and back into the light. The storm was passing, but the night was far from over. In her rear-view mirror, the Hartwell mansion still blazed against the darkness, a monument to everything she had created and lost. Maya's fingers found the small flash drive hanging from her keychain, a talisman she had carried for 7 months, containing the original source code that proved her authorship of Dynamex's core technology. She had never been able to use it, but tonight something felt different. Tonight the weight of silence had finally become unbearable. As she drove toward the next pickup, her reflection in the side mirror showed a woman who had been invisible for too long. The professional driver's uniform couldn't hide the sharp intelligence in her dark eyes, or the way her hands moved with the precise confidence of someone who had built empires with nothing but lines of code and fierce determination. Marcus Hartwell had looked right through her, seeing only what his privilege allowed him to perceive. But Maya Chen was about to remind the world exactly who she really was. The fountain's endless cycle echoed in her mind as she disappeared into the maze of San Francisco's streets, carrying with her the seeds of a reckoning that would shake the Hartwell empire to its very foundations. Some storms, Maya realized, were just beginning. The transformation began with a single phone call that shattered 7 years of carefully maintained silence. Maya sat in her studio apartment at 6:23 a.m., watching the sunrise over San Francisco while Amanda Foster's contacts in the legal community worked through the night to build a case that would finally force the world to confront the truth about Dynamex's stolen foundation.
Maya, you need to see this. Amanda's voice crackled through the phone, exhausted but electrified with the kind of energy that came from watching justice finally find its footing. The Washington Post just published a comprehensive investigation. Front page, above the fold. They've traced the entire timeline of theft, and they're calling it the algorithm heist of the century. Maya's laptop screen displayed the article that would change everything. A meticulous, devastating exposé that laid out 7 years of intellectual property theft with the precision of a mathematical proof. The journalist, Sarah Martinez, had spent 3 weeks investigating the leaked documents and conducting interviews with dozens of former Hartwell Industries employees, MIT professors, and legal experts. The result was a narrative so comprehensive and damning that even Richard Hartwell's army of lawyers couldn't dismiss it as fabricated. The article began with a photograph that made Maya's heart stop. Her own MIT graduation portrait, the brilliant young woman who had believed the world rewarded innovation and hard work. Beside it was a more recent photo of Richard Hartwell at a technology conference accepting an award for Lifetime Achievement in Transportation Innovation. The visual contrast was devastating. Genius and thief, creator and appropriator, truth and lies, captured in a single frame. Listen to this, Amanda continued, apparently reading from her own copy of the article. Dr. Maya Chen's algorithms didn't just influence modern ride-sharing, they made it possible. Without her innovations in predictive routing and real-time optimization, companies like Dynamics would still be struggling with the basic mathematical problems that she solved 7 years ago in her MIT laboratory. Maya felt something fundamental shifting in her chest, a tectonic movement that she recognized as the sound of her own story finally being told correctly. For 7 years, the narrative of Dynamax's success had centered around Richard Hartwell's vision and determination. Now, for the first time, the world was learning about the brilliant woman whose stolen work had made that success possible. Her phone buzzed with incoming calls from journalists around the world, but Maya had agreed to give her first interview to 60 Minutes, the television news program that had committed to a full hour of investigation into the Dynamax scandal. The interview was scheduled for that afternoon, and Maya had spent the morning preparing to step out from behind 7 years of silence and invisibility. "Are you ready for this?" Amanda asked, apparently sensing Maya's combination of anticipation and terror. "Once you do this interview, there's no going back to anonymity. The Hartwells will fight dirty, they'll try to destroy your credibility, and the media circus is going to be intense." Maya looked around her tiny studio apartment, taking inventory of the life she had built in the shadows of her own stolen achievements. The Dynamites uniform hanging in her closet, the stack of driving records that documented 7 months of invisible service, the laptop containing Phoenix code that could revolutionize the industry if she ever found the courage to launch it. She was ready to leave it all behind. "I'm ready," Maya said, and for the first time in 7 years, she meant it completely. The 60 Minutes interview took place in a neutral location, a conference room at Amanda's hotel that had been transformed into a television studio for the afternoon. The interviewer was Leslie Stahl, whose reputation for rigorous fact-checking and fearless questioning had made her legendary in journalism circles. Maya had watched her dismantle powerful people with surgical precision for decades. Now she was hoping those same skills would help resurrect her buried truth. "Dr. Chen," Leslie began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had interviewed presidents and tech moguls with equal skepticism. "You've been silent for 7 years about what you claim is the theft of intellectual property that's now worth billions of dollars. Why speak up now?" Maya had prepared for this question, but sitting under the television lights with cameras capturing every micro-expression, the answer came from somewhere deeper than strategy. "Because I realized that my silence was enabling other people's lies. Every day I stayed invisible, Richard Hartwell got to tell the world that he was the genius behind Dynamics. Every interview where he took credit for my work was another day that innovation got separated from innovator." Leslie's follow-up questions were precisely the kind of forensic investigation Maya had hoped for. She asked about the technical details that proved authorship, the timeline of collaboration and betrayal, the legal settlements that had buried the truth beneath layers of corporate protection. Maya answered each question with the mathematical precision that had made her algorithms revolutionary, laying out evidence with the clarity of someone who had spent years thinking about how to prove the unprovable. "Let's talk about the technical evidence," Leslie said, pulling out printed copies of code samples that had been included in the leaked documents. "These algorithms are highly sophisticated, involving complex mathematical modeling that goes beyond basic computer programming. Can you walk us through how someone without advanced training in computational mathematics could have developed this technology?" Maya felt the familiar surge of pride that came from discussing her life's work, although it was now tempered by 7 years of injustice. Route optimization at this level requires a deep understanding of graph theory, machine learning, and predictive analytics. You can't just stumble into these solutions. They represent years of research into the fundamental mathematical relationships that govern urban transportation patterns. "And Richard Hartwell's background at the time you developed these algorithms?"
"Business development and marketing," Maya replied. "He had no formal training in computer science, no published research in mathematics, no track record of technical innovation, which is why I was so excited when he approached me about commercializing my research. I thought he would handle the business side while I continued to develop the technology." Leslie's expression remained professionally neutral, but Maya could see the journalist's investigative instincts processing the contradiction between Hartwell's claimed expertise and his actual qualifications. "What happened when you realized he was claiming credit for your work?" Maya's voice caught slightly as she remembered the moment her partnership had transformed into betrayal. "I discovered that the patents had been filed under his name only, without my knowledge or consent. When I confronted him about it, he claimed that since I had been working as a consultant rather than an employee, all intellectual property belonged to the company. But the consulting agreement I thought I had signed had been altered after the fact to remove my ownership rights." "You sued him?" "I tried to. But by then, Dynamics was already worth hundreds of millions of dollars and Hartwell had hired the best lawyers money could buy. They buried me in legal paperwork, dragged out the process for 3 years, and eventually forced me to accept a settlement that included a non-disclosure agreement. Leslie leaned forward, her journalist's instincts focused on the heart of the story. That settlement included a provision that you could never publicly claim credit for developing the Dynamics algorithms. Maya nodded, feeling the weight of 7 years of enforced silence. They essentially paid me to disappear, and for a long time that felt like my only option. The interview continued for 2 hours, covering every aspect of Maya's story with the thoroughness that had made 60 Minutes famous for exposing uncomfortable truths. Maya found herself describing not just the technical details of the theft, but the emotional cost of watching her life's work be celebrated as someone else's genius. She talked about the 7 months of driving for Dynamics, the cruel irony of serving passengers who used technology she had created while remaining invisible to them. "You've been driving for the very company that stole your algorithms," Leslie observed. "That must have been incredibly difficult. It was like being forced to attend your own funeral. Every day, I served people who were using my innovations to get around the city, but they had no idea that the woman driving them had made their convenience possible." The most powerful moment of the interview came when Leslie asked Maya to demonstrate her technical expertise in real time. Maya was given access to a computer and asked to modify Dynamics' current routing algorithm to improve efficiency. Within 20 minutes, she had identified 3 bottlenecks in the system and written code that would reduce average travel times by 12%, improvements that would save millions of hours of travel time across Dynamics' user base. How long would it take a team of programmers to develop these same improvements? Probably 6 months to a year, if they could develop them at all. The optimizations I just wrote require understanding the mathematical relationships that I built into the original algorithms. Without that foundational knowledge, most programmers would be working blind. Leslie's final question cut to the heart of everything Maya had endured. "What do you want people to understand about your story?" Maya paused, thinking about Marcus Hartwell's casual dismissal of her existence, about Richard Hartwell's confident lies about innovation and hard work, about 7 years of watching other people claim credit for her genius. "I want people to understand that innovation has a human face. Behind every algorithm, every breakthrough, every technological advancement that makes life better, there's a real person who dedicated their life to solving impossible problems. When we allow that work to be stolen and rebranded, we're not just enabling theft, we're teaching the world that brilliance doesn't matter unless it comes attached to money and power." The interview would air in 3 days, but news of its existence leaked within hours. Maya's phone exploded with calls from reporters, legal experts, and technology leaders who wanted to support her fight for recognition. MIT issued a statement describing her as one of the most brilliant graduates in the university's history and calling for a full investigation into the theft of her intellectual property. More importantly, other victims of similar theft began coming forward. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, whose educational algorithms had been stolen by a major software company. Mark Rodriguez, whose renewable energy innovations had been appropriated by a fossil fuel corporation. Sarah Kim, whose biotech research had been buried when her former partners sold their startup while excluding her from the deal. Maya realized that her story was part of a much larger pattern, a systematic theft of innovation that disproportionately affected women, minorities, and anyone who lacked the social connections to protect their intellectual property. The Dynamics case was becoming a symbol of everything wrong with how American capitalism treated actual innovators. "You've started something much bigger than your own case," Amanda told her during a strategy meeting the night before the 60 Minutes broadcast. "People are calling this the innovation theft movement. Congress is talking about hearings. The Patent Office is reviewing thousands of questionable filings." Maya felt the overwhelming responsibility of representing something larger than her own stolen story. "What happens next?"
"We fight," Amanda replied, with the fierce determination that had made her legendary in academic circles. "And this time, we fight to win." The 60 Minutes broadcast shattered television ratings records for a technology story. 67 million people watched Maya Chen tell her story with mathematical precision and quiet dignity, dismantling 7 years of lies with evidence that could not be dismissed or buried. The program's fact-checkers had spent weeks verifying every claim, and the result was a presentation so devastating that even Hartwell Industries' public relations team struggled to respond. Richard Hartwell's carefully prepared statement, released an hour after the broadcast, called Maya's allegations a desperate attempt to profit from someone else's success and promised that the truth would soon be revealed in court. But the statement felt hollow in the face of Maya's detailed technical demonstrations and the mountain of corroborating evidence that supported her claims. The real revelation came in the program's final segment, when Leslie Stahl announced that the U.S. Department of Justice had opened a criminal investigation into intellectual property theft at Hartwell Industries. Federal prosecutors were reviewing evidence that Richard Hartwell had knowingly filed false patent applications and committed securities fraud by claiming ownership of technology he had stolen. Dr. Maya Chen's story isn't just about one stolen algorithm. It's about whether American innovation will be rewarded based on merit and hard work, or whether it will continue to be hijacked by people with more money than morals. Section 3. Escalation and conflict. The second encounter with Marcus Hartwell happened on a Tuesday afternoon that started like any other day in Maya's carefully orchestrated invisibility. She had completed 4 rides since lunch, a tech executive who spent the entire trip complaining about his stock options, 2 tourists who wanted her to take their Instagram photos at the Golden Gate Bridge, and an elderly woman going to chemotherapy who tipped her in homemade cookies and stories about her grandchildren. It was the kind of day that reminded Maya why she had fallen in love with the city's human complexity, even as it reinforced her status as a ghost in the machine of other people's lives. The pickup request came from the same exclusive nightclub where she had first driven Marcus, but this time the hour was different. 3:47 p.m., when the afternoon sun cast long shadows between the buildings and the club's neon signs looked garish and desperate against the daylight. Maya's heart rate accelerated slightly as she recognized the location, muscle memory triggering a cocktail of dread and anticipation that she couldn't quite name. Marcus emerged from the club's entrance looking significantly worse than he had the previous week. His Armani suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled in a way that suggested either a very long night or a very bad day. He clutched his phone like a lifeline, his free hand running through his hair with the repetitive nervousness of someone whose carefully constructed world had begun to show cracks. "Rough day?" Maya asked, although she already knew what had happened. Her own phone had been buzzing all morning with news alerts that she had been trying to ignore, headlines about Dynamites that made her stomach churn with a mixture of vindication and terror. Marcus looked up for the first time, catching her eyes in the rearview mirror. For a moment, Maya saw something she had never expected to see in those privileged features: genuine vulnerability. "You could say that," he said, attempting a laugh that came out strangled. "Have you seen the news today about Dynamites?" Maya's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice carefully neutral. "I don't usually follow tech news that closely. What happened?" "Someone leaked internal documents, really damaging stuff about the company's early development, questions about intellectual property, allegations of stolen code." Marcus's voice cracked slightly on the word stolen, as if the concept was so foreign to his worldview that speaking it aloud required physical effort.
"That sounds serious," Maya said, navigating through afternoon traffic while her heart hammered against her ribs. "What kind of allegations?" Marcus slumped further into his seat. "Apparently someone claims my father stole the core algorithms that made Dynamics possible. Some programmer who worked with him in the early days says she never got credit or compensation for her innovations." He shook his head, apparently baffled by the very concept. "It's insane. I mean, everyone knows my dad built Dynamics from scratch. He's told me the story 1,000 times, working 18-hour days, teaching himself to code, having this brilliant insight about route optimization. Maya's knuckles went white against the steering wheel. Hearing her own story told as someone else's achievement was painful enough, but hearing it dismissed as a fabrication by the son of the thief felt like being stabbed with her own knife. What does your father say about the allegations? He's furious, obviously. Says it's all lies, some disgruntled ex-employee trying to get attention. The legal team is already working on a response, probably going to sue everyone who reported the story. Marcus's voice gained strength as he repeated his father's talking points, the familiar rhythm of denial and counterattack that had apparently been the family's strategy for years. I mean, the timing is obviously suspicious. We just announced the IPO expansion. The company's worth more than ever. Of course, people are going to come out of the woodwork trying to get a piece of the action. Maya felt something dangerous building in her chest, a pressure that threatened to crack the careful facade she had maintained for 7 months. But what if the allegations are true? What if someone really did develop those algorithms and never got credit for them? The question hung in the air like smoke from a burning building. In the rearview mirror, Maya watched Marcus's face cycle through confusion, irritation, and something that might have been the first glimmer of actual thought. "That's impossible," he said finally, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "My father is many things, but he's not a thief. He built Dynamics through innovation and hard work." "Sometimes hard work takes different forms," Maya said, the words escaping before she could stop them. "Sometimes the people who create the most value are the ones who get the least recognition." Marcus stared at her reflection, apparently struck by this unexpected philosophical observation from his driver. "You sound like you know something about the tech industry." The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Maya could feel the weight of truth pressing against her teeth, 7 months of silence begging to be broken. She was 3 sentences away from revealing everything, from watching Marcus's face transform as he realized he had been lecturing the woman whose work had made the family's fortune possible. The temptation was almost overwhelming. Everyone in San Francisco knows something about tech. It's hard to avoid when you're driving people to and from their startups all day. They had reached Pacific Heights. The Hartwell mansion loomed ahead, unchanged from the week before. As they pulled into the circular driveway, Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Maya could see the caller ID reflected in the backseat window. Dad. She watched Marcus's face transform, anxiety replacing the brief moment of philosophical curiosity that had flickered in his eyes during their conversation. "I have to take this," Marcus said, answering the phone before Maya could respond. "Dad?" "Yeah, I saw the news. No, I haven't talked to anyone about it. What do you want me to do?" Richard Hartwell's voice carried clearly through the phone's speaker, a commanding baritone that Maya recognized from television interviews and conference presentations. She had once thought that voice represented wisdom and partnership. Now it sounded exactly like what it was, the voice of a man accustomed to controlling narratives and eliminating inconvenient truths. "Stay calm, don't engage with any reporters, and remember that this is all lies from someone trying to damage the company," Richard Hartwell's voice crackled through the speaker. "We've dealt with this kind of nonsense before. Our legal team is already working on a comprehensive response that will shut down these ridiculous claims once and for all." Maya's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she listened to the man who had stolen her life's work dismiss her truth as nonsense. The casual arrogance in his voice, the complete confidence that money and lawyers could bury any inconvenient reality, made her realize that she had been naive to think a simple leak would be enough. The Hartwells had spent years perfecting the art of making problems disappear. "What about the technical evidence?" Marcus asked, apparently having read more of the news coverage than Maya had initially realized. "Some of the articles are pretty specific about the coding style and algorithmic approaches. They're saying they have proof that Dad couldn't have written the original programs." There was a pause on the other end of the line, long enough for Maya to hear Richard Hartwell calculating his response. "Technical evidence can be fabricated, son. Anyone with basic programming knowledge can create fake code and backdate it to look authentic. This is exactly the kind of sophisticated fraud we're dealing with." Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had expected denial, legal threats, maybe even character assassination, but she hadn't anticipated this level of calculated deception, the willingness to completely rewrite technical reality to maintain a profitable fiction. Richard Hartwell wasn't just stealing credit for her work, he was systematically destroying the very concept of truth in the process.
Should I be worried about the company? Marcus asked, his voice smaller than Maya had ever heard it. I mean, if this gets worse, could it affect the stock price? The expansion plans? The company is fine, Richard replied, with the practiced confidence of someone who had weathered other storms by burying them beneath legal paperwork and financial settlements. Dynamics is built on solid fundamentals and proven technology. No one can take that away from us. The irony was so perfect, it felt like a mathematical proof of cosmic injustice. Richard Hartwell was absolutely right. No one could take away the technology that formed Dynamex's foundation, because he had already taken it from someone else so thoroughly that even he seemed to believe his own lies. Marcus ended the call and sat in silence for a moment, staring at the imposing facade of his family home. In the rearview mirror, Maya could see him processing the conversation, perhaps beginning to question things he had never thought to question before. The afternoon light cast sharp shadows across his face, highlighting the family resemblance that connected him to a legacy built on intellectual theft. "My father is a good man," Marcus said suddenly, as if Maya had argued otherwise. "He's built something important, something that helps people get around the city more efficiently. That has to count for something, right?" Maya felt the weight of 7 months' worth of careful silence pressing against her throat. "Good and complicated aren't mutually exclusive," she said finally. "People can create value while also causing harm. The question is what they do when they realize the harm they've caused." Marcus turned to look at her directly for the first time since entering the car, studying her face with an attention that made Maya's pulse quicken. For a moment, she wondered if he was beginning to see her as something more than a convenient transportation service, if the stress of the day had cracked his privileged blindness enough to let in some actual curiosity about the human being who had been driving him around. "You talk like someone who's thought about this before, like you've experienced something similar." The observation was more perceptive than Maya had given him credit for. "Everyone's experienced injustice in some form," she replied, keeping her voice carefully neutral despite the hurricane building in her chest. "The difference is whether you have the power to do anything about it." Marcus paid his fare with the same expensive carelessness as always, but this time he hesitated before getting out of the car. "This whole thing with the company," he said, apparently needing to voice his thoughts to someone who couldn't repeat them to his social circle. "What if it's true? What if my father really did steal someone's work?" Maya met his eyes in the rearview mirror, seeing genuine uncertainty there for the first time. Then it's suppose the question becomes whether truth matters more than comfort, and whether you're brave enough to find out which one you value more. Marcus climbed out of the car and walked toward his family's mansion with slower steps than usual, his shoulders carrying a weight that designer suits couldn't disguise. Maya watched him disappear through the imposing front doors, then sat in the driveway for several minutes, processing what had just happened. For the first time in 7 months, Marcus Hartwell had looked at her as if she might be a real person with thoughts worth considering. It was a small crack in his armor of privilege, but cracks had a way of spreading if you knew where to apply pressure. Her phone buzzed with news alerts that she had been ignoring all day. The leaked documents were causing exactly the kind of chaos she had hoped for, but they were also triggering the kind of sophisticated damage control that only billion-dollar companies could afford. Hartwell Industries had already issued a statement denying all allegations and threatening legal action against anyone who repeated the malicious fabrications. Their stock price had dropped by 12% in morning trading, then partially recovered as investors decided the controversy would probably blow over like so many others. Maya's second ride of the afternoon took her to the Mission District, where she picked up Dr. Elena Santos, a biotechnology researcher who was running late for a conference presentation. Elena climbed into the back seat with the harried energy of someone juggling too many important responsibilities, her arms full of research papers and presentation slides. "Sorry I'm running behind. This presentation could determine whether we get funding for the next phase of our cancer research. No pressure, right?" Maya found herself genuinely interested in Elena's work, a rare break from the tech executives and venture capitalists who usually filled her back seat. "What kind of cancer research?" Targeted immunotherapy for pediatric brain tumors, Elena replied, her face lighting up with the passion that drove people to spend their lives fighting impossible battles. We've developed a treatment that could potentially save children who currently have no options, but convincing investors to fund research that might not be profitable for decades, that's the real challenge.
As they drove through the afternoon traffic, Elena talked about the frustrating intersection of scientific innovation and financial reality. Her research team had made genuine breakthroughs, but translating those discoveries into treatments required funding from people who cared more about quarterly returns than saving children's lives. The parallel to Maya's own situation was painfully obvious. Both women had created something revolutionary, but the systems designed to reward innovation seemed more interested in rewarding the people who controlled the money. The worst part, Elena continued, apparently finding it therapeutic to voice her frustrations to a sympathetic stranger, is when investors suggest that we should focus on more commercially viable applications, as if the value of a human life can be calculated on a spreadsheet. Maya navigated through a complex intersection while processing the bitter irony of Elena's words. Sometimes the people who create the most value aren't the ones who get to decide how it's used, or who gets credit for creating it. Elena looked up from her laptop, apparently struck by the observation. That's exactly right. The system is designed to funnel money and recognition toward people who already have both, while the actual innovators struggle for scraps. She paused, studying Maya's reflection in the rearview mirror. You sound like you've experienced that firsthand. The conversation was veering into dangerous territory, but Maya found herself reluctant to retreat behind her usual professional neutrality. Elena's passion for her work, her willingness to fight an uphill battle for something that mattered, reminded Maya of her own younger self, the woman who had believed that brilliance and determination would be enough to change the world. I used to work in tech, Maya said, choosing her words carefully, before I started driving. I learned that having the best ideas doesn't always mean getting the credit for them. What kind of tech work? Elena asked, apparently genuinely curious about her driver's background. Maya's heart rate accelerated as she approached the edge of her carefully maintained cover story. Software development, algorithms for optimization and routing, nothing very glamorous. Are you kidding? Elena laughed. That kind of work is the foundation of half the companies in Silicon Valley. Route optimization alone probably affects millions of people every day. What company did you work for? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Maya could feel the weight of truth pressing against her teeth, 7 months of silence begging to be broken. Elena was exactly the kind of person who would understand the injustice of her situation, who would be outraged by the systematic theft of intellectual property. But revealing the truth would mean exposing herself, making herself vulnerable to retaliation from people with unlimited resources and no moral constraints. A startup that got acquired, Maya said, choosing the safest possible version of the truth. The usual Silicon Valley story. Build something innovative, get bought out by a bigger company, and watch them rebrand your work as their own invention. Elena nodded sympathetically. That's the problem with the entire ecosystem. The people who do the actual creating rarely get to control what happens to their creations. It's like a feudal system disguised as a meritocracy. They arrived at the conference center where Elena was presenting her research, a gleaming building that housed dozens of events designed to connect innovators with investors. Maya had driven to this location countless times, varying scientists and entrepreneurs who believed they were going to change the world if they could just find the right combination of passion and funding. As Elena gathered her research papers and laptop, she paused to look directly at Maya. Whatever you created at that startup, Elena said, I hope you know that your work mattered even if you didn't get the recognition you deserved. Real innovation always leaves traces even when the credit gets stolen. Maya felt something crack open in her chest, a dam of carefully contained emotion threatening to burst.
"Thank you," she managed, though the words felt inadequate for the gift Elena had just given her. The simple acknowledgement that her invisible work had value, that her stolen story mattered. After Elena disappeared into the conference center, Maya sat in her car and allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from unknown numbers, probably journalists who had somehow tracked down her contact information. The leaked documents were causing exactly the kind of chaos she had hoped for, but they were also turning her into a target for people who specialized in making problems disappear. Her third ride of the day was a young programmer named Kevin, who worked for one of Dynamix's competitors. He climbed into the back seat with the exhausted enthusiasm of someone who loved their work despite its frustrations, his laptop bag covered with programming conference stickers and caffeine-stained notebooks. "Crazy day in the tech world," Kevin said, apparently assuming that everyone in San Francisco was following the Dynamix controversy. "Did you see that story about stolen algorithms? Someone leaked internal documents claiming that the company's founder basically stole his core technology from a former partner." Maya's heart rate accelerated as she approached the edge of her carefully maintained cover story. "I heard something about that. Pretty serious allegations." "Serious is an understatement," Kevin replied, pulling out his phone to show Maya a screenshot of code snippets that had been published alongside the leaked documents. "I've been studying these algorithms for years. They're the foundation of modern route optimization. If someone really developed this technology and never got credit for it, that's not just corporate theft. It's like stealing someone's entire professional legacy."
Maya glanced at the phone screen and felt her heart stop. The code displayed there was unmistakably hers, not just conceptually, but literally. She recognized her own coding style, her particular approach to nested loops and recursive functions, even the specific variable names she had used 7 years ago when she believed she was building something revolutionary in partnership with someone she trusted. "The technical evidence looks pretty compelling," Kevin continued, apparently not noticing Maya's sudden tension. "I mean, you can fake a lot of things, but coding style is like a fingerprint. Whoever wrote these original algorithms has a very distinctive approach to problem solving." Maya forced herself to breathe normally, though seeing her own stolen work displayed casually on a stranger's phone felt like watching her own autopsy. "What makes you so sure about the coding style?" Kevin's enthusiasm for technical details overcame any awareness of his driver's expertise. "Look at these function names, the way the loops are structured, the commenting style. This programmer had a really elegant approach to complexity theory. There's a mathematical sophistication here that most commercial developers don't possess. Whoever wrote this code understood route optimization at a level that goes way beyond standard computer science." Maya felt a perverse pride hearing her work praised by someone who understood its technical brilliance, even as the injustice of the situation made her want to scream. Kevin was describing her innovations with the kind of reverence that should have made her famous in programming circles, but instead she was driving him around the city while pretending not to understand the significance of her own achievements. "So, you think the allegations might be true?" Maya asked, genuinely curious about how the tech community was processing the leaked information. "Honestly, the technical evidence is pretty overwhelming, and it would explain a lot about Dynamix's early development that never quite made sense. Richard Hartwell's background was in business development, not computer science. Everyone always wondered how he suddenly developed these incredibly sophisticated algorithms without any apparent learning curve." Maya navigated through the afternoon traffic while processing Kevin's casual destruction of Richard Hartwell's carefully constructed mythology. In the tech community, apparently, her leaked documents were being received as definitive proof of intellectual property theft. The only question was whether the legal and financial systems would care about technical truth, or whether money and power would once again triumph over justice. "What do you think will happen to the programmer?" Maya asked, though she was really asking about her own future, the one who claims she developed the original algorithms. Kevin was quiet for a moment, apparently considering the question seriously. "That's the tragic part," he said finally. "Even if she proves her case beyond any doubt, the legal system is designed to favor people with deeper pockets. Dynamites can afford to tie her up in court for decades, bleed her dry with legal fees, make her life miserable until she gives up or goes broke. Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. Kevin was articulating her worst fears, the reason she had spent 7 months driving in circles instead of fighting for her stolen legacy. The system wasn't designed to reward truth or punish theft. It was designed to protect people who already had power and money. But sometimes, Kevin continued, his voice taking on a note of optimism that surprised Maya, public pressure can accomplish what the legal system can't. If this story gets enough attention, if people start demanding accountability, it might force some kind of justice even without a court victory. They arrived at Kevin's destination, a co-working space in the Mission that housed dozens of small tech companies. As he gathered his belongings, he turned to look at Maya directly. "You know, you seem to know a lot about technology for someone who drives for a living. Ever think about getting back into programming?" Maya felt the familiar stab of irony that had become her daily bread. Maybe someday, when the time is right. After Kevin disappeared into the co-working space, Maya sat in her car and stared at her reflection in the side mirror. The woman looking back at her had spent 7 months hiding from her own story, accepting invisibility as the price of survival. But Kevin's analysis had crystallized something she was only beginning to understand. Her leaked documents weren't just causing chaos for the Hartwells, they were creating an opportunity for justice that might not come again. Her phone buzzed with another ride request, but for the first time in months, Maya hesitated before accepting it. The afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the city, and she found herself thinking about Elena's words about innovation leaving traces and Kevin's observation about the power of public pressure. Perhaps it was time to stop hiding behind her carefully maintained anonymity and start fighting for the recognition that had been stolen from her. The leaked documents were just the beginning. Maya Chen had spent 7 months learning how to be invisible, but she was about to discover whether she still remembered how to be seen. Her 4th passenger of the day changed everything.
The pickup location was outside a small cafe in the Castro district, and Maya's heart nearly stopped when she saw who was waiting on the sidewalk. Dr. Amanda Foster had been Maya's thesis advisor at MIT, the brilliant computer scientist who had guided her through her doctoral research and encouraged her to pursue the transportation optimization algorithms that would eventually become the foundation of Dynamics. Amanda looked older now, her red hair streaked with silver, but her sharp green eyes still carried the same fierce intelligence that had made her legendary in academic circles. Amanda climbed into the back seat with the efficient grace of someone who had spent decades navigating between the theoretical elegance of computer science and the messy realities of technological implementation. She was in San Francisco for a conference on ethical AI development, though Maya suspected that wasn't the only reason she was in the city today. "MIT reunion?" Maya asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral despite the emotional earthquake happening in her chest. Amanda studied Maya's reflection in the rearview mirror with the focused attention of someone trained to recognize patterns and anomalies. "Something like that," she said slowly, "though I'm actually here because of some very interesting news that broke this morning. Documents leaked about Dynamics technologies and their foundational algorithms." Maya's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I've heard about that story. Pretty serious allegations. Serious enough that I felt compelled to travel 3,000 miles to investigate them personally," Amanda replied, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had spent years watching brilliance be stolen by mediocrity. "You see, I had a student once who developed exactly the kind of algorithms described in those leaked documents. A brilliant young woman who could have revolutionized transportation technology if she hadn't been betrayed by someone she trusted." The words hung in the air like a mathematical proof of Maya's worst fears. Amanda knew. Of course she knew. The coding style, the algorithmic approaches, the particular way Maya structured her solutions were as recognizable to her former advisor as handwriting. Amanda had guided Maya through the development of those very algorithms, had helped her refine the mathematical models that made real-time route optimization possible.
"What happened to your student?" Maya asked, though they both knew the answer. "She disappeared," Amanda said, continuing to study Maya's reflection with laser focus. Brilliant young woman, groundbreaking research, promising career ahead of her. Then she got involved with some entrepreneur who claimed he wanted to commercialize her algorithms. Next thing anyone knew, she was gone, and he was famous for inventing technology that bore all the hallmarks of her particular genius. Maya felt 7 months of carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. Amanda's voice carried not just knowledge, but pain, the particular anguish of a mentor who had watched their protégé's life's work be stolen and rebranded as someone else's triumph. "That must have been difficult to watch," Maya managed. "It was devastating," Amanda replied, "not just for her, but for the entire field. Maya Chen was one of the most promising computer scientists of her generation. Her work on predictive routing algorithms could have opened up entirely new fields of research. Instead, it got buried beneath corporate lies and legal settlements." Hearing her own name spoken aloud after 7 months of anonymity hit Maya like a physical blow. She pulled the car over to the side of the road, her hands shaking too badly to continue driving safely. In the rearview mirror, she could see Amanda watching her with a mixture of compassion and vindication. "Hello, Maya. I've been looking for you for 7 years. Maya turned around to face her former mentor directly, abandoning any pretense that she was just another anonymous driver. "How did you find me?" "The leaked documents contained coding samples that I would recognize anywhere. But more than that, I've been tracking patterns in ride-sharing efficiency improvements over the past year, certain routes, certain optimizations that bore the hallmarks of your particular approach to problem-solving. I suspected you might be working in the industry under an assumed identity." Maya felt a strange combination of relief and terror washing over her. After 7 months of invisibility, being truly seen by someone who understood her work felt like coming back to life. But exposure also meant vulnerability, and the Hartwells had demonstrated their willingness to destroy anyone who threatened their carefully constructed narrative. "Why did you leak the documents? After all these years of silence, what changed?" Maya thought about Marcus Hartwell's casual dismissal of her existence, his earnest lectures about his father's innovation, the way he had suggested she might want to consider a career in coding. "I got tired of being invisible. I got tired of watching my own work be celebrated as someone else's genius while I drove the people who benefited from it around the city." Amanda nodded with the understanding of someone who had spent decades fighting for recognition in a field dominated by people who believed brilliance was their exclusive domain. "The response has been everything I hoped it would be. The technical community is rallying around the evidence. 3 major universities have issued statements supporting your claims. Even some of Hartwell's former employees are coming forward with corroborating evidence."
Maya felt a surge of hope that was immediately tempered by realistic fear. And Hartwell Industries? Fighting back exactly as you'd expect, Amanda replied grimly. "They've hired the most expensive legal team money can buy. They're claiming the evidence is fabricated, and they're already trying to discredit you personally. But here's the thing, Maya. This time, you're not fighting alone." Amanda pulled out her laptop and showed Maya a document that made her heart skip several beats. It was a formal letter of support signed by 47 computer science professors from universities around the world, all vouching for Maya's technical brilliance and the authenticity of her leaked algorithms. The letter described her work as foundational to modern transportation technology and called for a full investigation into the systematic theft of intellectual property by Hartwell Industries. "How did you organize this so quickly?" Maya asked, staring at the list of names that read like a who's who of computer science academia. "The technical community is smaller than you think," Amanda replied, "and we all remember your work, even if the business world forgot it. When I started reaching out to colleagues about your situation, the response was immediate and unanimous. Everyone wanted to help correct this injustice." Maya felt tears building in her eyes for the first time in months.
After 7 years of isolation, 7 months of invisibility, she was discovering that her work had never been truly forgotten. The people who understood the technical significance of her innovations had been waiting for an opportunity to speak up for her. "There's more, Maya," Amanda continued, her voice taking on the excited tone of someone sharing genuinely good news. "The leaked documents have triggered investigations by 3 different federal agencies. The Securities and Exchange Commission is looking into whether Hartwell Industries committed fraud in their IPO filings by claiming ownership of technology they stole. The Patent Office is reviewing all of Dynamix's foundational patents, and the Department of Justice is conducting a preliminary investigation into intellectual property theft." Maya felt the world shifting around her in ways that she was still struggling to process. The carefully planned leak had triggered a cascade of consequences that went beyond anything she had imagined. "What does this mean for me personally?" "It means you have choices. Real choices, probably for the first time since this whole nightmare began. The question is whether you're ready to stop being invisible and start fighting for what's rightfully yours." Maya's phone buzzed with yet another ride request, but this time she declined it without hesitation. Her days of driving other people around the city were about to end, one way or another. "What kind of choices?" Amanda's smile was fierce with the satisfaction of a mentor finally able to help her protege claim their rightful place in the world, the kind that could change everything. 6 months later, Maya Chen stood before the Senate Judiciary Committee, no longer invisible. The hearing room buzzed with tension as cameras captured her testimony about systematic intellectual property theft in Silicon Valley. Behind her sat Amanda Foster and 47 computer science professors who had traveled from around the world to support her. "Dr. Chen," Senator Williams leaned forward, "can you explain in simple terms what Hartwell Industries stole from you?" Maya's voice was steady, her technical expertise finally given the platform it deserved. "They didn't just steal code, Senator. They stole the mathematical foundation that makes modern ride-sharing possible. Every efficient route, every optimized pickup, every minute saved by millions of users, that all traces back to algorithms I developed 7 years ago." The committee room fell silent as Maya demonstrated her code in real time, improving Dynamix's current routing by 15% in under 10 minutes. Richard Hartwell, sitting with his legal team, watched his empire crumble as the woman he'd tried to erase proved her genius to the world. Marcus Hartwell, in the gallery, finally understood who had been driving him home all those months. The recognition in his eyes was complete now: shame, understanding, and something that might have been respect. The committee's unanimous recommendation led to criminal charges against Richard Hartwell and the largest intellectual property settlement in tech history. Maya used the compensation to launch Phoenix Technologies, developing open-source transportation algorithms that would be freely available to researchers worldwide. On the day she signed the papers for her new company, Maya drove past the Hartwell mansion one last time. The fountains still flowed in their endless cycles, but the house seemed smaller now, diminished by the weight of exposed lies. Maya Chen was no longer invisible, and she would make sure no brilliant mind would be erased again. The storm had finally passed, but the phoenix rising from its ashes would transform the tech industry forever. Maya's journey from invisible driver to tech industry revolutionary shows that brilliance can't stay hidden forever. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories of hidden genius fighting for recognition. Your engagement helps these important stories reach the people who need to hear them most.